Hello class, my name is Evgenia Bashko and I will be telling you about economic policy's impact on agriculture. My paper explores the ways in which economic incentives or economic policies might help combat the harmful consequences of current agricultural practices and climate change. Economic policies can encompass any sort of economic stimulation, including such incentives as taxes, tariffs, subsidies, fiscal punishments, fines, and sanctions. Economic policy use has the potential to limit the harmful agricultural practices, and theoretically, economic policies should be one of the most impactful incentives because financial manipulation is the one that people respond the most to. According to IMF, or International Monetary Fund, the attention should be paid to the way in which changes affect the supply of labor in order to conserve the farming practices that we currently have and don't impact the production as much. Consumers also should be incentivized more than producers because the demand, if the demand is lowered, then the suppliers would have to adapt as well. Economic policies thus have potential power to battle unethical, unsustainable, or illegal agricultural practices as well. This research will focus on how such policies could impact or are already affecting water systems, land systems, and greenhouse gas emissions. Now I will discuss economic policy and water systems. Water systems encompass the water resources that are available for humans and other organisms to use. On the image at the low left, it indicates the levels of severity in water depletion in various areas in the US and Canada. The South is especially prone to water depletion and drought, as the climate change is exacerbating the weather extremes and high temperatures. The issue of water depletion is prevalent in many parts of the world, but economic policies have the potential to mitigate some of the impacts. These policies should impact consumers more and should take the form of higher water taxes or subsidies for water conservation. Producers, on the other hand, also could be and should be financially incentivized, particularly the agricultural producers that use water extensively for irrigation, utilizing 70% of fresh water for this purpose. Moreover, 40% of that water is wasted due to leakage or evaporation. It has been indicated in the research that increasing an irrigator's cost of applied water may be a more efficacious water conservation policy than subsidizing the irrigator's cost of investing in improved irrigation efficiency. Thus, it is safe to assume that financial punishments work better than financial rewards. The top image indicates the interrelations between water systems, agriculture, and climate change, which illustrate that the world is highly interconnected and it is essential to institute economic policies which would tackle sustainability issues with all of these fields. And all of the components must be targeted in order to actually reach substantial results. Next, I will discuss economic policy and land systems. So the image to the left indicates the severity of tree cover loss in the United States and parts of Canada and Mexico, according to the Forest Watch website that the professors provided for us. In the recent years, a central challenge for sustainability is how to preserve forest ecosystems and the services that they provide us while enhancing food production. As the population is growing, we have to think not only about how to feed the population as per the Sustainable Development Goals, but to also realize that these agricultural practices are harmful and we have to limit those as much as possible. So examples would be to issue greater fines for deforestation and fire ignition, institute laws against deforestation, increase taxes for deforesting an area, or impose sanctions on individuals who participate in this practice. Some of the common consequences of agriculture on land systems include soil erosion, land conversion, natural habitat destruction, and deforestation. Economic policies must work in order to limit those harmful activities. One of the most important factors is for financial policies to attempt and limit the use of fertilizers because that would significantly decrease soil erosion due to agriculture. Furthermore, such policies must primarily focus on minimizing nutrient loss, maximizing productive capacity, limiting natural habitat conversion, and increasing the efficiency of land and water use. Next, I will discuss economic policy and greenhouse gas emissions. Currently, there are several practices that people are utilizing, such as carbon trading and carbon taxation. And it is shown that these practices are actually not as efficient as we would want them to be because they're actually taking quite a while to bring any significant results. Economic policies are already instituted to combat the greenhouse gas emissions, and their effects can be traced, but further action is still required. Measures like carbon trading are quite relevant today, and the economic policies that control this process are intended to lower the greenhouse gas emissions. Yet the impact of this policy is still limited, and it is essential to establish harsher control over this process. A huge issue with instituting economic policies related to greenhouse gas emissions is the fact that such measures are taking a lot of time to actually cause significant impact. Another interesting fact is that carbon prices should be increased in order to actually cause significant results. For example, it has been researched that cheaper carbon prices lead to further land management and increase in agricultural practices that are harmful, but higher prices yield positive results, especially something like reforestation. The issue with that, though, is that smaller farming practices might lose their business since they don't have enough money to keep afloat. Another policy that is quite popular today is carbon taxation. For example, in Norway, they have instituted that policy a long time ago, and Norway's example indicates that the efficiency of combating climate change with this policy is lower than desired because there is a lot of leniency. Norway's energy sector is responsible for a large portion of greenhouse gas emissions, and this field must be targeted first, and it isn't at the current moment. In conclusion, the impact of economic policy on the agricultural sector still has to be researched, but there is evidence to assume that such measures of economic stimulation will have a positive impact if formulated, calibrated, and implemented correctly. Measures such as tariffs, greenhouse gas taxes, fines, environmental subsidies, and sanctions could all potentially lead to a greener future in agriculture. Oftentimes, consumers and suppliers alike voluntarily choose to improve their environmental performance when even a subtle incentive is mentioned, not even yet implemented. What is important to realize is that economic policies can also harm individuals, countries, or even the whole world. The example would be the sanctions that are imposed on other countries or individuals without proper consideration first. The sanctions caused special changes on the import markets of certain types of agricultural products, raw material, and food that changed the style of consumers' behavior. Before instituting any economic policies, it is important to realize what kind of consequences the world will face and whether the positive impact will outweigh the negative one. In the end, difficulties are to be expected when the assessment of policy effectiveness has to be considered. Difficulties will be present when implementing and formulating the economic policies, but at this point action is required, even if it will be based on trial and error. Hope dies last, but with climate change and harmful agricultural practices, it is about immediate action rather than passive ignorance. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you learned something about economic policies.